What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. If you guys have been following the channel for the last couple of months, you know that I have been slowly making my way through all of the Alien films and revisiting all of them, doing full spoiler deep dives on all of those movies, and it has been a blast to do. And all of that was leading up to today's film that we're going to be talking about that I just got out of an early screening for, and that movie is simply titled Alien Romulus. Directed by Fede Alvaréz, who wrote this film alongside Renaux. This film stars people like Cailee Spaeny, David Jonsson, Archie Renaux, Elizabeth Merced, Aileen Wu, and Spike Fern. Alright, Alien Romulus, easily one of my most anticipated films of the year. I had a blast going back and covering all of those other Alien films, and I look forward to still covering the Alien vs. Predator films, but it was so much fun to do those videos, a lot of new subscribers from those videos, and a lot of you who have come back to support the individual films that I've covered since then. And so it's been a lot of fun to talk to some new people about movies, and I feel like the Alien franchise kind of opened the door to me meeting new people here on YouTube, which is always a positive. And so yeah, this was a movie I was highly excited for, and when I saw that the director of this film was going to be Fede Alvaréz, who's done things like the Evil Dead remake as well as Don't Breathe, I knew that he was going to bring a very unique energy to this film, because the Alien franchise has some really big highs and also some pretty low lows when it comes down to certain installments in the franchise. And even though I have a lot of love for the franchise as a whole, I was really hoping for a new strong installment in the franchise, as it has been a good chunk of years since the last film, Alien Covenant. And so with Fede Alvaréz being great when it comes to atmosphere, tone, a dark gritty vibe, and gore, I knew that this was going to be a standout film in the franchise, and I'm happy to say it's exactly that. I loved this film, and I have to say it's become probably one of my favorite Alien films that has come out. I've only seen the film once though, of course, and I saw it in an early press screening, so maybe there's a little bit of excitement underneath the skin here, but I can genuinely say that I thought it was a very well made Alien film that utilized fantastic practical effects, fantastic cinematography, had a great musical score that was original to this film but also played on the musical cues from previous installments in this franchise, and did a lot to stand on its own as its own narrative while also connecting itself specifically to the original Alien film and some of the prequels. For anybody who is not familiar with where this takes place in the franchise, Alien Romulus takes place right between Alien and Aliens. So throughout the course of the film, while majority of this film does stand on its own and have its own story and characters to follow, there are moments where we get a little bit of reference and connective tissue to that original Alien film, as well as Prometheus and Alien Covenant. I won't say much more as far as the connections, but just so you know that, if you haven't maybe done a rewatch of those movies, you don't need it, but I do think it would help your viewing experience. And one thing I've really enjoyed about the marketing of this film is that it's kind of just showcased itself as another Alien film, more kind of highlighting the horror tone of it, making it look like it's going back to the basics with the original film. And one thing I could say that I loved about this film is it felt like the perfect marriage of Alien and Aliens. Alien being the more horror-based, thriller-based, kind of slower tone filmed in the franchise, with Aliens being the all-out action movie. And so I think that this film struck a great balance of being a horror film, a thriller film that takes its time with characters and has those creepy moments, while also having some big fun over-the-top action sequences throughout the course of the film. It just felt like the perfect blend of the two films, which Aliens is my personal favorite, but Alien and Aliens are my favorite in the franchise. So for this film to feel like a perfect blend of the two really just kind of spoke to my soul. And one thing I've enjoyed about the marketing about this film is that it hasn't really shown much about what it's all about, so I am going to stay pretty vague, but let's get into what this movie is all about. The movie opens up when we're introduced to Cailee Spaeny's character, Rain, alongside her adopted brother of sorts, played by David Jonsson, Andy. The two of them live on this planet that they're not really too happy to be living on. There's no sunlight on this planet, and they're essentially just slaves. They're working their days away at the hopes that they'll be able to leave this planet one day, but it seems like that goal is further and further away every day. Not too long into the film, they reconvene with some old friends who all tell them that they found that there is some sort of space station or spacecraft that's floating in the atmosphere that nobody is in. It's just kind of been abandoned, and there's tons of equipment on there from the Weyland company. So they decide to get all together, head up to that spacecraft that nobody's in, to try to steal various parts, to try to make some money, to try to do what they can for themselves to get off of this planet. And as you can come to expect if you've seen an Alien film or if you've seen the trailers, when they get to this spacecraft that has nobody on it, well, there's a good reason why there's nobody on it, and I'll leave it at that. Man, I love this film. I found it to be an incredibly well-made film and arguably one of the better made films in the entirety of the Alien franchise, which is a very high bar. The Alien franchise, even in the worst installments, typically have really great set design. You know, the performances vary on the various films, but more often than not, they tend to have solid performances. But when it comes down to the filmmaking, usually the cinematography, the musical score, the practical effects, the locations used, the settings, the costume design, all of those things are usually top tier when it comes down to these movies, and this film is no different. Fede Alvaréz definitely praised this film a lot and the production of this film for mostly using practical effects, and you can definitely see that's on display here with this film. This is a film that heavily utilizes and prioritizes using practical effects. It's also a film that gloated the fact that it was the first to ever use full-on practical effect face huggers that could crawl all over the ground. They even brought it out at Comic-Con to show the audience. And so the practical effects in this film across the board are top tier, not only when it comes to the face huggers and the costume design, the settings, the lightings, the locations that they're in, but the xenomorphs. And that's just always going to be a top tier thing to me. If you guys have been following my reviews for the Alien franchise, you know that the xenomorph is without a doubt my favorite movie monster, one of my favorite movie monsters of all time. And I absolutely love the design of the creature, and I love when I can see these actors acting alongside a practical version of the xenomorph. Whenever we have digital versions of the monster in various installments, I don't hate it. There are some that I don't think look great, but I do think it takes away from that practicality, from that tangible fear that the actors are able to portray. And I think in this movie you can clearly see that these actors were definitely feeling some fear acting alongside their co-star, these xenomorph animatronics. And just when it comes down to the way it looks, cinematically this movie is beautiful. The animatronics look phenomenal. The puppeteer work, the costuming to bring the xenomorph to life was great. The face huggers, you add in all of the other gore effects throughout the course of the film that are also practical. There is digital effects throughout the course of the film, of course, as the film takes place in space, but they are minimally used. While there are some VFX shots throughout the course of the film, I was so impressed by how much of this film is caught in camera, how much of this film is practical. I mean, it's absolutely stunning, and without a doubt, this film has to be one of the most beautiful looking films in the franchise. Now, when the movie was over, I talked to some of my other critic peers that were near me, and it seemed like those who didn't like the film felt like maybe it leaned a little too heavily into some of the mythology of the other Alien films, which didn't bother me personally, but I figured it's worth mentioning because I do think that is going to be a criticism that some people have. And one guy in particular that I spoke to just felt like another Alien film, like it didn't feel like it added too much new to the franchise until the latter half of the film. While I don't necessarily agree with that, and I found myself really invested in the film, I thought it was a great balance of Alien and Aliens. It dipped its toes in the original mythology, adding a little bit more to the mythology that was also built in things like Prometheus and Alien Covenant. I do understand that this is a film that will likely maybe feel like another Alien film to some people. If you're not crazy on the Alien movies as they are, if it just isn't really your cup of tea to just watch another movie with a bunch of characters who have to fight off aliens and some of them get killed and some of them survive, then maybe this film is not going to work for you. But if you are a fan of the Alien franchise and you just want to see a great xenomorph horror tale here with some fun action and some great practical effects and filmmaking to make it feel scary again, then I think you're going to have a lot of fun with this movie. I actually had to pee pretty early on into this movie, which was very unfortunate, and I held it the entire runtime. I mean, it got painful at times, but I could not get myself to stand up, and there was moments I was like, damn, I gotta pee. Maybe I'll just go right now and I'll come back. And every time I was so glad I didn't get up to go pee. And by the time we got to the end of the movie, I was actually so grateful for how good and gripping the film was, because there were segments where I forgot I had to pee and I wasn't really focused on it. And I think that just speaks to the strength of the movie. I did not want to move. I didn't want to miss a single second of this movie because it was beautiful to look at. The performances were great. The tension was high. The stakes were high. The practical effects were just gorgeous. I was just absolutely mind blown by all of the filmmaking. And when it comes down to to the musical score as well, I was also really impressed by that, because the film kind of made me feel like I was watching a horror sci-fi film from the 80s. So that musical score kind of felt like something you would have heard in the Aliens franchise in the 80s. It definitely had a lot of musical cues that were new to this film, but also brought back a lot of great musical themes from the original film, from Aliens, and even from Prometheus, which I loved hearing. So I liked that the composer of this film was able to kind of bring in all those musical cues, and I just think that Fede Alvaréz just had a great vision for what this movie was. It has its own look when it comes down to the franchise, while also feeling very consistent with the look of the franchise overall. I think it honors the legacy of the franchise and what Ridley Scott has done with this franchise before, and honors the mythology without kind of feeling like its own film that maybe tries to kind of do its own thing too much. It does feel like it kind of pulls from those other things that Ridley Scott has already kind of established in this franchise to kind of honor that and expand upon it in cool ways. So yeah, I had a great time with this movie, and the last thing I want to talk about is the cast in particular. I think that everybody here does give a good performance, as when it comes down to any movie like this, of course, you're going to have certain characters that are taken out fairly quickly, or they're just kind of to be fodder for the xenomorph at certain points. So not all of the characters here get a whole lot of time to shine. They do have some pretty epic kills in the film, but you know, not all the characters get a whole lot of characterization. Of course, Cailee Spaeny as the main character is a huge standout here. I think she carries a lot of the emotional weight of the film on her shoulders, and she does an incredible job. And I'm only kind of really familiar with her because of Priscilla last year, as well as Civil War earlier this year. So it's really great to see her consistently in all these big roles and being in big movies that have really showcased a lot of range when it comes down to her performance. And I think she does a great job here too. But if I had to kind of say who my personal standout was in the film, it's actually the character of Andy, played by David Jonsson, who is this adopted brother of sorts. They don't really give you a lot about his character when it comes to the marketing, so I'm going to keep it pretty vague, but his character and what they do with him throughout the course of the film was probably the most surprising to me. When I looked at the cast, I didn't expect what they would do with his character, and he was the character I found myself the most interested in, the most engaged with, whether it was good or bad in those sequences. I really found his character to be the most interesting to watch. I was always glued to the screen whenever he was involved in a sequence, and he was easily the biggest standout here for me. I think he has a lot to do when it comes down to performance as well, and I think he really sells a lot of those sequences. So between him and Cailee Spaeny, I think they really carried this movie. I think the rest of the cast is great as well. Isabella Merced I thought was great in the film as well as Richie Renaux. I thought that they really captured a lot of different kinds of characters too, characters that like each other, characters that have unspoken love, characters that love each other, characters that don't like each other. There was a nice mix of a bunch of different kinds of characters that have different kind of relationships with one another, which kind of added to the dynamics of the film feeling unique and fun and interesting. And I think it ultimately made for one of the more entertaining installments in the Alien franchise. So I'm going to stop rambling now. A big thanks to you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I definitely look forward to hearing all of you guys' opinions on this film. So if you were checking out Alien Romulus and you came back and you saw this review, or you're going to go and check it out, are you excited for it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Whatever the case may be, let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.